Hi, all. Welcome back. I am delighted to be here again with Zorana Ivcevic Pringle, who is a senior research scientist at the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. Zorana studies things like the role of emotions at work, emotion skills and creativity, emotions and well-being. She's done work on gender and gender-related attitudes and how they affect the experience at work and about work. She's done so many interesting research projects over the years. It's always a delight to be able to pick her brain, to understand what her findings are telling us about emotions and emotional intelligence. And especially today, I'm very excited to talk to her about this topic about what an emotionally intelligent organization can look like. I mean, we spend a lot of time talking about how we can show up as individuals more emotionally intelligent and the benefit from that. But let's look at the bigger scale here of what's possible and what organizations are working on. And so it's a real pleasure to be in conversation with Zorana today. I'm going to hand it over to her. She's got some information about the research she's been conducting, and then we'll talk about it. So thank you, Zorana, for being here, and take it away.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll start screen sharing. Okay, there we go. And thank you for the invitation. Thank you for this conference. It's always a pleasure to be with OG. And as Andrea mentioned, today I like us to think about what are emotional intelligent organizations or what they could be. And we'll start really with just reminding ourselves on the next slide what are the abilities of emotional intelligence. I suspect that here the audience is one of those who are familiar with emotional intelligence and have a good sense of what it is, but it's always good to start there as our basis. So emotional intelligence includes 4 different abilities. It starts with perceiving emotions. So that doesn't mean that we think we are good at reading emotions. It means that we actually can really figure it out, and how we read somebody's emotions corresponds closely, not necessarily perfectly, but closely to what they are experiencing. So we can read emotions from facial expressions, from tone of voice, from people's behavior, their actions, and their expression. The second ability of emotional intelligence is the ability to use emotions to help thinking and problem solving. And sometimes this seems to many people counterintuitive, because everybody knows emotions make us not be rational and make us be susceptible to biases in thinking. And while that is true, what the ability to use emotions does is to give us different perspectives, is to step aside and think about a decision, think about a problem we are having from perspectives that could come from different feelings. So when we are optimistic, we are going to be more positive about the chances of something succeeding. When we are more pessimistic feeling, we are going to think that chances are lower, risks are greater. And to make the best decision and to think in most productive and effective ways, we'll try to see both of those perspectives. And then the ability to understand emotions means that we know how emotions change, how one can become another, how they can progress. We have a vocabulary rich and detailed and specific vocabulary to describe emotions. And that becomes necessary in order to effectively regulate emotions. Effectively regulating emotions means changing and influencing the course of our emotions. We need to be able to perceive what's going on. We need to be able to understand it in order to be able to regulate it the best possible way. So those are our individual abilities that we have as individuals. So let's imagine that we have these abilities, which are hard to acquire because it takes practice and they are very rarely taught in our schools, in our daily life. But it's possible to learn. We have a lot of evidence that it's possible to learn them. So let's say we manage to master these skills. So what's next? So you have the skills, but will you use them? Now, you in this audience are very motivated. You are here at the EI21 conference. You are here because you want to hear about emotional intelligence, because you think it is important. So chances are you are going to use these skills once you have them. However, let's think of those people who might not be here. Maybe some of your colleagues, maybe some people you know in your families who might not have that same attitude. And it turns out that even having skills is not enough. What we need is what we have here on the next slide, and that is we need motivation. We need to want to use these skills. We need to put the effort to use these skills. And there are three parts to the motivation. One is what psychologists call self-efficacy. That is a belief that you can do it. Yes, I can, like the little engine that could kept saying. And that one is, in a way, the easiest. We tend to oftentimes even overestimate our abilities. So that one is not as much of a challenge. Intrinsic value is when you truly, deeply believe that emotional intelligence is important, and it is important to act in these ways for you as a human being. It is part of your identity that you want to act in these ways. This is harder to do. Again, it's going to come pretty naturally to you. You are here and you are motivated. You're putting some of your time into this conference. But it is not the case for everybody. And the final one is the most challenging one. And that is the one of instrumentality. What that means is whether acting in emotional intelligent ways is helpful for other goals you have. Is it going to be helpful at work for you to get promotions, be noticed by your coworkers and your supervisors? Or is it going to be harmful? You might think, well, how could it be harmful? Well, it turns out that it could be harmful in some kinds of environments. And next thing is that we want really to talk about is those kinds of environments. So if we go on, we really see that there are two kinds of organizational factors that are especially important for instrumentality. One is emotional culture, and one is team climate. So let's go one by one. So let's first talk about emotional culture. Emotional culture includes what the organization actually does. It includes values and how those values are lived in daily behavior, in daily activity of the organization, and the practices. These can be practices of hiring, of promotion, those things that are very tangible. And sometimes what happens in organizations is this attitude of it is not professional to talk about emotions at work. Emotions have to be left at the doorstep, as if that was possible to do, because we are full humans with come with emotions. if that attitude and that kind of value exists, it can be actually costly for a person to show emotional intelligence at work, because showing it means acknowledging emotions. It means seeing and reacting to emotions of others. It means helping others manage emotions and show understanding for what's going on with them. And none of that can be accomplished if people are concerned that acknowledging emotions is going to get them in trouble. The second part, in addition to culture, is team climate. And it's important to have a positive team climate, but there is a big danger. Positive climate does not mean being positive at all times. There was actually a legal case a few years ago with a big telecommunications company, T-Mobile, requiring everybody to be positive at all times at work. It's not achievable, creates additional stress, and creates a climate of toxic positivity. So that is not what we mean here. We don't have to be cheery, happy all the time, but what we do need is two ingredients. And those are the ingredients of psychological safety, which means that we are not worried that we are going to be rejected because of who we are, including all of who we are, including our emotions. And having that psychological safety enables us to have our individual voice and to voice ideas, to voice concerns, and to truly work towards the benefit of the organization and our own expression within the place where we work. So the question then becomes, and that's the question that I want to end today, is, well, what can organizations do? And oftentimes organizations start with the sort of obvious part of building skills. And building skills is crucially important. However, what I wanted to really stress to you today is that building skills on its own is not going to be sufficient. If the organization doesn't do something on its own as an organization, not just a collection of individuals, just having skills does not necessarily get translated in real life behavior. And I would like to open a discussion here. And I know that Andrea, our moderator, has a bunch of questions, and then we can invite your participation too of where this takes us.
Yeah, I've been chomping at the bit, Zorana. I'm so fascinated by this. And especially this last comment that you made around how building skills is not enough. Like, what role does skill building have in the process? Like those four abilities to recognize our own emotions, recognize emotions in others, regulate ourselves, regulate, even co-regulate accordingly. That's a lot to take on individually to become better at that ourselves. So what comes after building skills?
Well, building skills, number one, is possible. That's the very important first lesson. We have evidence from schools, we have evidence from workplaces. It's possible to learn these skills by children. It's possible to learn them as adults. It's not too late to start, whatever your age is. So that is really the number one lesson we have to start with. And you are right, it is a tall order, because very rarely do we have any instruction in these skills and any feedback in these skills early on in our lives. That is starting to change, and I suspect that there are some people here in this room who are from schools, who are educators and educational leaders. So that is starting to change with the social emotional learning movement in schools. But we can also learn as adults in the workplaces. Um,
Mm-hmm.
what we need to learn is some instruction, some help, because these skills are not obvious, and we need feedback. Um, uh, Remember learning any skill. Remember learning how to drive a car. I actually learned how to drive a car as an adult, and I remember that process. And it goes slowly. It goes with feedback. You see how you're doing, you see whether you're managing to stay straight. And with that feedback, you get better at it. So that is the first place to start with building the skills, but also acknowledging that that's not going to be the only thing that we need to do.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So you also had mentioned that, these motivations, self-efficacy, intrinsic value, and instrumentality. Um, where in your observation or research or travels, do you see that organizations are on a scale of intrinsic value right now? My sense is that it's improved, that there are more organizations that agree that emotional intelligence is important or foundational. In fact, Roy Herbst said yesterday, you can't have leadership without emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
So, if that's one of the primary motivations of creating a better and more emotionally intelligent organization, how are we doing on that journey in your observation?
Yeah, I think that there are more and more organizations that are acknowledging the importance of emotional intelligence, and embracing it as a value. It is a process. So
Mm-hmm.
it definitely helps for senior leaders to model um, and to acknowledge the importance. Um, it has to trickle throughout the organization. So it is of great importance for senior leaders to acknowledge it, but then also to build their leadership teams within the organization who are going to not see this as additional check on the checklist, but as something that is lived in a daily life of the organization. And I think that you're totally right. There's more awareness, as organizational behavior research showing the benefits of emotional intelligence and acting in emotional intelligent ways, especially for leaders, comes out and becomes more, and people become more aware of it. I think that that intrinsic value is being built. Um, it it then becomes an issue. How do we communicate these values so that people see the instrumentality?
Mm-hmm. So, okay, so let's like be really practical about it, Zorana. Let's say that I am a manager and I manage a team of 10 people. Uh,
Mhm.
what if I'm an emotionally intelligent manager? What am I doing on a daily basis or a weekly basis? I mean, and what I'm getting at is what does this look like in practice?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great question. Not everybody is a CEO of a company and can set the tone from the top, right? So
Mhm.
we have to be doing something in whatever roles we find ourselves. So imagine that you are a team leader, have a team of 10. Chances are that you have team meetings.
Yep.
So, what you are going to have agency over is your individual behavior. You can influence how you act, and you can also influence how the tone, the climate that you set within your team. And team meetings are a big way how that tone can be set. So, how do you start a team meeting? Uh, you can start it with an agenda. Good morning. You can start it with Today, we are going to go over these 3 points, and everybody's going to go around and we'll check about your progress.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can just insert, this doesn't have to be a long period of time, but insert a moment, insert a minute for an emotion checking
Mm-hmm.
and acknowledging that emotions exist, that people are at different places themselves. They have different reasons for that. And starting a meeting with asking people how they feel on the team can really set a tone. Now, it is very important how you ask the question.
I
So
was
just
gonna say, Zorana, like, you could go all California woo-woo on people, right? It's like, how are you feeling? Could be triggering for some people. So, yeah, say more
yes.
about how do you ask it in a way that actually sets a tone of openness and responsiveness.
Yeah, you can go on a whole roller coaster of different ways, right? You can get very deep. I like
Mhm.
your term of California woo woo. You can also go very checklisty. You can go and say, okay, I have to start this meeting with asking people how they feel, so I'm going to do that. And you don't even look at people as you are saying that, probably because you are overwhelmed. I'm not saying that this is because people do not care about others necessarily. They could be, but maybe they are overwhelmed themselves. And
Mhm.
in my work, especially in the healthcare industry, I have seen a lot of that, where people are um, people are having so much to do, such high level of stress, always being asked to do more with less. And at
Mhm.
some point, you cannot do more with less because there isn't anything left. Um, and they don't have the emotional capacity. So I'm not saying people do not care. I am saying it is usually helpful to find a way to take a moment and ask a question in a manner that invites authenticity.
Mhm.
And one way that people can invite authenticity and set the tone also and set some boundaries too is by modeling themselves. So
Yeah.
if you ask the question of how you're feeling to your team members, but you yourself are not sharing, or you only ever share one of those vague answers of busy, stressed, or fine, people are not going to feel that psychological safety of being able to share themselves something that is specific and real and
Yeah.
therefore helpful.
Yeah.
Then the question how we are feeling becomes another point of stress.
Yeah. So let's say that well, let me because there's this great conversation happening in chat right now about like
Mhm.
what if there's not psychological safety. So I want to kind of paint
Mhm.
pave two roads that we might walk down, Zorana, to answer that. One is, let's say I'm a very self-absorbed manager and I historically have not cared about my team's feelings, and you just have to deal with my own temper tantrums and my own moods. Perhaps we've all worked for someone like that before. And we know that if that person asked me how I felt, I probably would not be truthful or I wouldn't share because it's not safe. So
Right.
if we are a manager who has not exhibited, and this is coming off of what you just said, exhibited any of those four abilities ourselves, that we are not authentically expressing our own emotions, we're not regulated ourselves, we don't seem to care or acknowledge emotions of others, it's probably my first move might not be to ask people how they're feeling in a meeting. I'd have to work on myself first. Right?
Absolutely. Right.
Um,
And chances are also that if you were one of those people, you would not want to ask uh, your team
uh-huh.
how they're feeling. So those two things are related.
Yeah.
You would think it's a waste of time. You would think emotions don't matter. They are a waste of time. They are in the way.
Hmm.
So chances are that those people are not going to be asking to begin with.
Right. And I also want to paint a different picture here too of we had a chance to work with a leadership team at an auto manufacturing plant. And they used the mood meter as their meeting check-in. And this is Midwest. This is not, the coast and its progressive ways. This is like, heartland stuff. And the way that they did it um, was to say, all right, so what quadrant are you in? And this one story that was related to me was a gentleman who rushed in at the last minute. And so the division president said, how are you feeling? And he said, actually, I'm in the red quadrant. I'm really stressed. We have a client issue. And I don't know exactly how I'm going to solve it, but it's urgent. And the division president said, okay, that says a lot. How can the people in this room help you with that? And so they started sharing with what perspective they had on that client issue and said, all right, any other sharing that you need to do for this meeting's purpose? No? Okay, go off and solve your problem. And so that was a way of using emotions and that check-in to help move the work forward and acknowledge the pressure that this person was under, that had no California woo-woo feeling about it, that it was
Yeah,
just very a practical way of doing that.
yeah.
Are you seeing that? Like you talked about how you do work in healthcare. Is the mood meter being used in that way to serve that purpose? Or what other ways have you seen? If I'm this team manager and I've got 10 people that work for me and I want to implement some way of checking in, what are some ways of doing that?
A mood, and the example that you shared is really a best case scenario. It
Uh-huh.
is exactly what the ideal way of using emotional intelligence is. The point is not for this to become a therapy session or a sharing session. The point is to acknowledge emotions in the service of work, because we are at work and we have to acknowledge emotions even if they're coming from elsewhere, so that then they don't have to influence our work in unwanted ways, or that um, they can invite collaboration from others and help in solving problems, like in the case be feeling stressed, not knowing how to respond to a particular client. So that is
Mm-hmm.
the ideal case scenario. It really shows that sharing something authentically can lead to better outcomes, be those productivity, creativity, innovation outcomes, because um, because that emotion started a conversation that otherwise wouldn't have happened. So imagine
Mm-hmm.
the same meeting without this emotion check-in. So
Right.
exact same meeting, but the person does not acknowledge their stress. They are just asked to report what's going on. They only mention that they are going to have to deal with the client later on, but they don't mention their challenge. And they are left to deal with it completely on their own without important and helpful feedback and different perspectives from the others on the team.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see the usefulness of it when you compare what would it be like if this didn't happen.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's the most powerful comparison there.
Yeah. This is a related question, I think. Like any research or data you have around culture, like, and this is related to another question in Q&A as well, is who should be responsible for implementing organizational emotional intelligence within organizations? So, like, if we're thinking big beyond the team manager, what does it look like? What kinds of instruments are put in place? What behaviors change in your experience?
So we have some agency, we have power to work in our teams And we can start there even if we are not leaders or high in the organization. Ideal case is that implementation starts from the very top.
Mm-hmm.
And to give you an example from my work with hospitals, is when CEOs and the senior leadership team gets involved in an effort of teaching the skills of emotional intelligence and implementing them throughout the organization. There is a tone set. There is a
Mm-hmm.
value that is communicated. It is not something that is delegated and said, you do it in your little neck of the woods. Oftentimes, HR is tasked
Mm-hmm.
with teaching skills, and they do a good job in teaching the skills. So this is not to say anything about HR not being capable of doing it. They are, but they're teaching just the skills, right? The
Yeah.
whole organization, for the organization to be emotional intelligent, skills are not going to be enough, but you need to have those values and practices. You need to have the tone that is set, and that is most effectively set from the top. So
Got it.
in the my work with hospitals, those where the CEOs were present at all the workshops, where the CEO and their senior team was asking questions, where they were sharing what behavior they were changing and implementing themselves, then you could see a shift where others started being able to voice their opinions and their ideas and then try things out themselves.
Yeah. So many more of us are, in the big middle of an organization and not at the top. So much like, I'm going to say it Iger because I know an Iger. Iger, we're like, we don't pull the strings and we can't drive that culture change of tone from the top. So what can we do from where we're at to spread our influence or spread the goodness of emotional intelligence in practice
Mhm.
in our day-to-day work?
Yeah, and you know how I was talking about culture and then team climate, and the culture is set more from the top.
Yeah.
But the team climate is on the team level. So we are
Yep.
all embedded in teams. And even if we are not a team leader, there's something that we can do. So even if we are not a team leader, we can consider how we can apply our skills at work. And we can try to do it. Now, we will have to be, of course, careful whether that is safe. And I'm not saying that it's always safe, but we can set the tone even in our work groups, even
Yeah.
without being in a position of leadership, because there's this feature of emotions where there is spreading, contagion of emotions, and on how we deal with them. And that can help even an individual with changing their behavior, influencing their behavior to set the tone in their teams, and then leaders setting the tone in their teams, units, and so on.
Yeah. I was really struck by your example of T-Mobile and their toxic positivity and the statement you make around, creating a positive culture does not mean being positive all the time. Um, and what made me think of that is obviously what you're saying right now. And there's another question here about ways that we can model emotional intelligence from where we're at in an organization. And it strikes me that one way that we can do that is to be even perhaps more open when we're experiencing emotions that are not positive. Maybe I'm frustrated, maybe I'm stressed, or maybe I'm feeling down today because my proposal got rejected or whatever it may be. um, what are some ways that you see that we can model that an important statement of creating a positive culture where we're at when everything is not roses and sunshine.
And roses and sunshine happen occasionally, and it's wonderful when they happen. But life and work are challenging things, so they are not always going to be roses and sunshine, and it's not possible to make it so. No matter of skills or no matter of anything really is going to make it like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's important to acknowledge that we are going to have challenges, and we have lots of different emotions, and all of those emotions have their purpose, and they are telling us something.
Mm-hmm.
They are useful in some ways. Social scientists really call this feature of emotions that emotions are data, that emotions are information, and they're telling us something. So I study creativity and innovation, and so think of the process of creating something.
Mm-hmm.
It can be a piece of art. It can be a new study lesson. It can be a lesson plan. It can be I write research papers. Whatever our work is, there are different things that we end up creating. It can be processes. It can be products. It can be reports. All kinds of things, and we can be prepared for that. We are competent people. We know what we are doing, but chances are that there are going to be times when we get frustrated. And we get frustrated because what we are doing is actually hard.
Mm-hmm.
We do not get frustrated because we are not competent or we are not able to deal with it. We get frustrated because we are trying to do something ambitious and something challenging. Like I am right now writing a paper that I was stuck on for a while because it wasn't quite right. I knew it could get even accepted, but it wasn't quite right. It wasn't doing things in the most effective ways. If you're writing a lesson plan, you are the head of learning. You are creating whole new programs. There are times when it's challenging to figure out how to convey something, how to create the activities.
Mm-hmm.
We get frustrated because we are taking challenging things and we are pushing beyond what is obvious. And that frustration has a purpose of telling us the data, the information it conveys is that particular way that you are trying something is not working.
Mm-hmm.
You need to try a different approach. So just working harder is not going to help. You really have to try something different. So that's important information from frustration. Stress is telling you that there is, well, too much of something. You are too taxed. The demands are too high. You have to figure out how to create additional resources to address those demands. Now, those can be personal resources, those can be social resources of getting help from others,
Mm-hmm.
those can be some material resources. It's going to depend on the situation. But each of these emotions is telling us something really important. In a way, happiness is telling us the least. It tells us it's all good, everything is rosy. um, and it's important to listen to all the emotions.
Yeah, thank you for that. Because I'm thinking, I just went through a big creative process and in getting our OG Decide product ready to go, and it is a roller coaster when you undertake a big creative endeavor like that. And you're right; it's the frustrations, the stress, the feeling of overwhelm, the doubt, the navel gazing. All of it is part of that process, and it's all very useful. And I think what I hear you saying, Zorana, is that the better that I am at recognizing that in myself as an individual, probably also helps me become better at identifying or recognizing that in my colleagues or the people who work for me. Or even I've heard stories about emotionally intelligent individuals who have been able to talk to their bosses in different ways because of the emotions that they're seeing that person display, and to have a conversation about root causes. You know, you seem really frustrated. Frustration is really about a goal being blocked. What feels like you can't make progress right now is it, so. Like, is that? Do I have that right? Is that the right frame to think about it? Is I use it on myself, and then I start using those skills to observe and have conversations with others.
Yeah, I think that's a great example. We start developing the skills ourselves, and then we realized what's their value in interactions with others most often.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a great example, talking to your supervisor, talking to your boss, or talking to other colleagues, and um, being there to listen and to hear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, like, again, let's pull the lens way up and say, all right, here's an emotionally intelligent organization, organization A. What kind of outcomes do they get as an organization because they're emotionally intelligent, and what does it feel like to work there, as opposed to organization B, which maybe is more like a T-Mobile in that example, or maybe it's another organization where emotions are not allowed, or or it doesn't feel psychologically safe for some reason or another. What's the delta between these two organizations?
It feels very different to be in those places. So to even start at the level of teams and supervisors, interactions with their supervisors. We did a study here at the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence where we asked people, workers across the United States. It was more than 14,000 people across all
Mhm.
industries, representative of the US workforce. And we asked them to describe their supervisors. We asked them how they act. Do they recognize others' feelings? Do they acknowledge them? Um, do they try to take a step back and consider both uh, those information, those pieces of data from positive experiences and from more negative ones? Do they
Mhm.
understand how emotions influence decisions and how their own decisions influence how people feel? Whether they are able to help others regulate their feelings and better deal with the challenges. So we asked them all these questions, and then we looked at um, what are the differences between those who tell us that their supervisors act in highly emotional intelligent ways and
Yep.
those who tell us no they don't. And the differences were uh, pretty incredible. They were very, very stark. So those who are, some things were common, right? Some things, of course, everybody sometimes feeling happy, everybody sometimes feeling frustrated and angry and stressed. Those things are pretty general feelings that happen to everybody.
Yeah.
But if we go beyond that, if we
Mhm.
go beyond that and looked more specifically what happens, we've seen a big difference that those who describe their supervisors as acting not in an emotional, intelligent ways, quite to the contrary. They are telling us that they are experiencing a lot of emotions that are in the greater anger family. So, from annoyance, irritation, to anger and frustration.
Mhm.
That was very distinctive there. And another kind of cluster of feelings was about feeling underappreciated and unappreciated.
Mm.
So these supervisors create a feeling of acceptance or rejection in their employees.
Mm-hmm.
And on the flip side, those who describe their supervisors as highly emotional intelligent, well, they are telling us they are feeling everything to do with motivation. So they are feeling motivated. They think work can be fun. They are engaged. They are feeling challenge, and the challenge to which they want to rise and respond to. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so we see this dramatic change, dramatic difference. So that is
Mm-hmm.
even just on the level of teams, right? What we were talking about. What if I'm not a CEO? And chances are most of us are not.
Yeah.
That is a very immediate difference of how one individual's behavior can influence many others.
Mm-hmm.
And then um, uh, building that in the organization, it can also set the tone more broadly. So the leadership is particularly important to create the same kind of effect on a larger scale, where that sense of safety to share, safety to voice ideas or concerns are become possible. And we see the extreme cases of what happens when people are afraid and not able to share.
Mm-hmm.
In these recent instances of in at Boeing, where people were so afraid to voice that this one problem can be uh, severe in such a way that can actually cause airplanes to fail and fall out of the sky. So even knowing that people can get killed, the climate and the culture were such that people were not able to share even
Mm-hmm.
such dire things. um, and so it's easy to see those extremes, but the flip side also happens when people are able to share and they are able to work together to solve the problems and challenges.
Yeah, such a stark difference between the two. It's interesting you bring the Boeing example in. Nyla wanted to know if you could quote that article or the published findings from that study.
Yes, I can. I Would it be good for me to send it
Yeah,
to everybody? Yeah, I can share it with everybody. It was just published last year.
yeah, perfect. Thank you. And there's some great questions in our Q&A here that I wanted to get back to. Here's one from Louie about like what's coming up next, Zorana. You're always
Mhm.
right on the edge of emotion research. So can you give us a little sneak peek of what you're working on now? Um, we would love to hear that.
Thank you, Louis. And I am particularly excited about this work in organizations because we have studied and documented well what happens where these skills and behaviors of emotional intelligence exist on a smaller scale. Like in interactions between employees and supervisors or in teams, we don't know enough uh,
Mm-hmm.
about what happens on the large organizational level. So I am particularly excited about that. We have some research where we are looking at these practices and values that organizations have and how they are having consequences for engagement and burnout of their employees. And we find that this attitude of um, it is not okay to share emotions and emotions don't have any place in the workplace, leave them at the doorstep, is really predicting burnout at work.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that we are working on right now, and we really see that there are real consequences.
Is there a COVID effect of that? You know, Zorana, do you think that some of that has changed since we went through what we went through in 2020 and continue to live with?
Mhm.
now?
Yeah, we don't have data about it, but
Mhm.
everything we know about emotions tells us that yes, COVID um, has left us more stressed, has really taxed us. We know that positive emotions are really influenced by social interactions, and our social interactions have been, well, impaired, right? The last 2 years have been all about social distancing, not being able to be with people in person. And so our positive emotions have been depressed, while in the same time, we have all the worries and stresses that are related to health, that are related
Mhm.
to financial security, that are related to when are we going to come back to work and real life and normal life and all those questions. So we have something going on at the same time that makes it more difficult to experience positive emotions and increases the chance of negative emotions. Now, our research in the pandemic and how people feel in the pandemic shows that something that was very surprising to us, that even in the pandemic, even with all of this going on, positive feelings were still higher than the negative feelings.
Mhm.
Really speaks to the immense resilience of humans. Um, the picture looked different than in the normal times. So in the normal times, the positive feelings are much more positive than the negative, and that difference was diminished. Um, However, people were able to find to kind of keep together, keep themselves normal enough even in these times.
Yeah, got it. That certainly makes a lot of sense. Here's a an age-old question that I think sort of maybe relates to, maybe it's changed. That if organizations ask this question, that they might have been looking for smarts or technical capacity or competence. Do you see a shift in that in terms of the importance of um, EQ or emotional intelligence being hired into organizations, being cultivated in organizations as much or more than technical competency?
Mm. Uh, I uh, I don't really see very much of a movement in terms of hiring for emotional competencies.
Mhm.
I really like how you phrased it there, that you have mentioned investing in these competencies at work. And I think that is a great approach of acknowledging that. We need the technical competencies. They are not irrelevant. They are very much relevant. People have to be able um, to do the specific tasks of their jobs, but then also to acknowledge that having emotional competencies is only going to make them better able to do everything that comes with their job, not just the technical task, but interacting with coworkers,
Mhm.
with superordinates, with leaders, and with their clients. So investing in developing the skills and investing in a culture that acknowledges the importance of these behaviors is going to be productive on many levels.
Yeah, and a follow-up question on this thread is, has COVID actually created a doorway that hadn't been opened before to talking about
Mhm.
emotions and their impact? What have you seen there?
I think that is a great question, and I think there are opportunities in crises. And certainly, COVID time has made people more willing to address issues related to mental health,
Mhm.
um, and that is a very important step. Daily experience of emotions is not the same as mental health in terms of having having a diagnosis of something that is related but not the same thing. Um,
Mhm.
So I think that going a step further than acknowledging that there might be some mental health consequences is to acknowledge that they are daily experience, emotional experience consequences, and that acknowledging them is going to get us places.
Yeah. Um, so we have about 4 minutes left, Zorana. And I kind of like thinking about where we've been in our hour, that if we want to create a more emotionally intelligent organization, then no matter where I am in the organization, it starts with me, right? Well, that's true if I'm a CEO, if it's true if I'm an individual contributor, it's true if I'm a team manager. And when the first thing I need to do is start building my own skill set. And
Certainly. That
yeah. And
is number one, and that is something we can all do.
and so how do we do that? Like what's your experience in some of the best ways we can actually learn and use emotional intelligence skills?
There are organizations that offer emotional intelligence trainings, and those trainings can be very useful. And we have statistical data to show how valuable they are. However,
Mhm.
you might or might not be in one of those organizations. So let's assume that you are not, because if you are, go do that. There are other ways. So we are living in an age where learning is more accessible to people, and that is a wondrous thing, really, that we should take advantage of. So there is an app for everything, and of course there is an app, and not just one app. There is a host of apps that can help build emotion skills. So I know that OG has an app and a program that builds emotion skills in individuals. And I know that you work with organizations too,
Mhm.
where you offer different supports. Um, and that is a wonderful way that you can start as an individual or as an organization to have. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You do not have to start a program and invent a program of your own. Those are the resources there. There is another app that I have learned of that is very useful in developing skills interpersonally, so in a social context. It's
Mhm.
called Jago, Jaago, and what it does is it shows brief videos and asks people to identify emotions portrayed in the videos, but then goes a step further and it gives you feedback. It tells you whether
Mm.
you are correct or not. And through
Mm.
time, you can follow your progress.
Excellent.
And, and we at the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence are working on an app that is coming out, but not quite there yet. Stay tuned. That will be called How We Feel, where there is a program, again, it's a structured program that develops emotion skills, especially those of developing a vocabulary and understanding of emotions and a repertoire of strategies to manage emotions.
Yeah. Yeah, there's like you said, there's something for everyone. And um if the first order of business is to work on ourselves first, then you have lots of options, is what I'm taking from that. And of course, yeah, we're in the business of helping you do that too. So let us know if you want more information. This wasn't intended to be a sales pitch. I just wanted to be able to lay it out there that there are many ways you can work on building your emotional intelligence skills, and that in and of itself will create a ripple in your organization that will help shift the overall culture. So I want to thank you, Zorana, for spending the hour with us. This has been fantastic. I learned a ton, and appreciate the work that you're doing to help create more emotionally intelligent organizations of all kinds: school districts, hospitals, businesses, nonprofits, etc. We all need it, and we're so appreciative of the work that you're doing to bring this to light. So we have a short break that's coming up, and 15 minutes mark bracket. We'll be talking with Kenneth Cole. And so join us for that. And thank you again, Zorana, for being with us today. And I'll see you guys all really soon. Take care.
Thank you.